A note to listeners, American Hustlers was created from in-depth research and reporting, public records, and the opinions of participants. The views expressed do not reflect those of Frequency Machine, its affiliates, licensees, or employees. In some cases, names were changed to protect the privacy of those involved, and all subjects are presumed innocent until proven guilty. This episode also includes some violent and sexually explicit content that may be triggering to some. Listener discretion is strongly advised.
Start off on Thursday of Cliff Lambert's home.
What you're listening to is a murder confession.
And I wait right here, and he's waiting right here beside me.
And then
we'll just start stabbing.
The victim, Cliff Lambert, a single 74-year-old art dealer in Palm Springs, returned one evening to what he assumed was an empty house. It was anything but. He was ambushed and stabbed to death in his own kitchen.
Go ahead, show me how you did.
The man recounting the details of the attack is Craig McCarthy, one of two assailants. He's walking a Palm Springs detective through what happened, step by step.
Craig describes how he and the other attacker were led into Cliff Lambert's house by a man named Kaushal Niroula. They laid in wait, and as Cliff rounded the corner into his kitchen, they stabbed him to death with his own kitchen knives.
Now Cliff is hunched over here.
And he just went over and he just started stabbing.
He goes on to describe the blood on the ground. It's pooling around Cliff Lambert's limp, soon-to-be lifeless body.
The blood looks like jello now.
He tells the cops how after stabbing him repeatedly, he can hear him gurgling. Just gurgling blood.
After that, I can hear him like gurgling, like moaning, gurgling. Just gurgling blood. Kaushal comes back in the kitchen. He's like, "Is it done yet?"
Kaushal, the man that led the assailants there, enters the kitchen and asks calmly, "Is it done?"
The detective asks Craig what Kaushal's demeanor is like after Cliff's murder.
How's Kaushal? Is he cool, calm?
And here's Craig's eerie response.
Kaushal's like nothing had happened. It's like it's mundane for him.
It's mundane for him. For this Kaushal Niroula, hiring two hitmen and calmly hanging out in the living room while they stab someone in their kitchen is no big deal. Who is this man? Who is Kaushal Niroula? I'm Julie Golden, and before this job, I was just a casual consumer of crime podcasts who smartly avoided high-risk, dangerous scenarios like, investigating a murder.
And I'm Kim Kantner. I produce true crime docs for a living, and my happy safe place is murder. Together, Julie and I are peeling back the layers of this cold-blooded killer.
Who orchestrated the killing of Cliff Lambert, as casually as if he was ordering a ham on rye at the local bodega.
But what we'd soon find out is murder was the mere tip of the crime iceberg for Kaushal Niroula, who helped bankrupt an entire college,
forged and fenced artwork from the Queen of England,
defrauded a helpless wealthy mother of two,
and ran a lucrative real estate scam that totaled in the millions, just to name a few.
He was said to have escaped a bloody royal massacre in far-off Nepal, and the rumors of his black magic powers led him to being crowned the Dark Prince.
He had a devoted following of money-hungry criminals who would go on to become known as the gay grifters.
A group of men who would steal for him.
And who were asked to rape and kill for him, repeatedly.
As we venture deeper into Kaushal's past crimes, we'll meet countless victims too terrified to talk.
One victim who spent a decade trying to bring Kaushal and his criminal cabal to justice.
And find ourselves wondering multiple times what the truth really was. If we could believe the people we were talking to.
And whether it was actually safe to be telling this story at all.
It is.
So you keep telling me.
True Crime News presents American Hustlers.
And I picture what it would be like to be driving in Cliff's Mercedes, knowing that Cliff's body was in the trunk and you were looking for a place to go bury him.
This is Tyson Wrensch. He's driving through the desert, looking for a dead body. Cliff Lambert's body, to be precise, which the police never found.
Right now we're driving on the 10, and it's dark and very few lights, just is something I think of every time I drive this freeway.
Tyson knows this case inside and out because he was inside it. A victim of the same band of con men that Kaushal Niroula was at the center of. This isn't even the first time he's tried to find Cliff.
We didn't know what to look for.
When the police couldn't find the body, Tyson Wrensch hired a medium.
At this point, we were kind of open to anything to see if we could help find Cliff's body. And Carrie's in Arizona. I'm in Las Vegas.
Carrie is the medium. Works on the phone, paid by the hour.
We got on a conference call, and Carrie didn't know anything about the situation. We told her it was a murder, and she said was it a male? Yeah, she says, because I'm getting a male whose legs hurt. She saw numbers, the number 10 and the numbers 114. And I remember getting the goosebumps because I know that Cliff's house is just off the 10 freeway, and exit 114 is not far from Cliff's house.
So Tyson and a few friends went to the spot and started looking.
We're just looking for overturned dirt, something that didn't look natural.
Their efforts came up empty-handed. But Tyson hasn't stopped searching or thinking about it.
I had heard a rumor that Cliff was cremated and that perhaps Kaushal consumed some of the ashes so that he would gain the power of his kill.
Tyson did not know Cliff Lambert, never met him. So why the obsession with finding his corpse? It turns out, Tyson Wrensch, he could have been that lost body in the desert.
I helped put these guys behind bars, and I need to make sure they stay there, or else they're going to come for me.
It was a cold, damp, rainy day when Kim and I met with Tyson Wrensch in a cramped, nondescript Ramada Inn hotel room in West Hollywood. As we approached the hotel lobby, I started to take a step back and consider what we were getting ourselves into. Of all the gay grifters victims we contacted, Tyson Wrensch was the only one who wasn't too scared to talk to us.
So are you worried?
Why?
Like worried about these guys getting out and coming after us?
No.
Kim
What do you think
is not bothered by any of this.
You...
Unlike me, a nice Midwestern Jewish girl who's never met a criminal in her life, or at least that I know of. Kim, in spite of her petite, lithe dancer's frame and delicate doll-like features, is a tough-ass cookie. It becomes pretty clear early on why we're partnered on this story. She's the gas, I'm the brakes.
Okay, well, why?
Because if we did a podcast about these guys and they got out of prison and we ended up dead, it would obviously be them.
So that's your comfort. Just, it's a bad plan.
Yeah, it's a bad plan.
Okay.
Feel better?
No.
So somehow, between what I would call in Kim a delusional sense of confidence or death wish, and my reckless need to always know what's in the box, we jumped in, head first.
All right, I think we're going.
My name is Tyson Wrensch. I like long walks to the bank and short walks to the fridge.
Tyson's built like a linebacker, but he's got a youthful, boyish face that immediately puts you at ease.
If I'm in the middle of something and it's not where you want to go, stop me.
Okay.
You're in charge.
I'm at a loss for how this gentle giant ended up in the desert looking for a body.
This is a cautionary tale. It's a cautionary tale for everyone.
Kim and I thought we had arranged to meet with Tyson Wrensch to discuss his relationship with Kaushal Niroula and his role in Cliff Lambert's murder. But like so many things we encounter in this hall of mirrors, we were wrong. First, Tyson tells us, we need to know about Danny Garcia.
In the very beginning, we had a blast.
Danny was one of Tyson's closest friends, a fantastically pretty party boy, and also the person who would lead him to Kaushal. The year was 2002, and Tyson was doing quite well.
I was hired by Intel Corporation, the computer chip.
Intel at the height of the dot-com boom? If life was a game, Tyson was winning. A handsome guy with a handsome salary to match and living in the gay mecca of San Francisco's Castro neighborhood. It didn't take long for Tyson to find himself in a circle of other young, urban, upwardly mobile friends. Eventually, that would involve Kaushal Niroula. But first,
Tell me about the first time you met Danny Garcia.
There's a popular bar club in San Francisco called The Cafe. And the bars basically turn on the lights and kick you out at 1:30 because the doors have to be closed at 2. We called it the 2 o'clock scream when they turn on the lights and then you see who you're actually dancing with. And then everybody hangs out on the sidewalk just talking to all your friends. And Danny, who was under 21 at the time, was there. And he knew some of my friends and chatted with him.
What was your first impression?
He was probably one of the most charming people I've ever met. For being 19, 20, he was probably one of the most well-versed in everything about the world. He had traveled. He knew a lot of interesting facts about things. He was older beyond his years.
it wasn't long before Tyson and Danny became inseparable.
As our friendship grew,
Tyson felt he had found his equal. Danny had the smarts and bank account to keep up with him.
San Francisco is one of those cities where most people live paycheck to paycheck. And Danny was the only friend that I had where we could go away for a weekend somewhere and each pay half. In terms of where did he get his money? Well, his parents had created, they held the patent on the core technology behind laser hair removal.
According to Danny, his family got a sizable chunk of change for every machine that was sold. But their friendship was about more than material things. It was much more intimate than that. And that was because, ironically, it was not intimate.
In my 20s in San Francisco, if it was a friend of yours, you were sleeping with them. I mean, that's kind of, let's just call it for what it is. But it was nice to have, a guy friend who was truly a friend that you could talk to about anything. And
so Tyson relished it, opened his heart to it. Not long after Danny and Tyson became BFFs, Danny introduced him to one of his other close friends.
And Danny had mentioned to me about this other friend of his who was a prince from Nepal.
A prince from Nepal. Actual royalty.
And it didn't surprise me. I mean, Danny ran with circles of influential people.
The prince's name? Kaushal Niroula. The same man who would go on to orchestrate the brutal murder of Cliff Lambert. Of course, when Tyson met him, he had no reason to suspect that Kaushal was dangerous. He was just a colorful addition to Danny's posse, a flashy, smooth operator who presented himself as Nepalese royalty.
Kaushal was also charming, a good-looking guy.
He seemed like so many larger-than-life big talkers in the high-paced, moneyed gay social scene of San Francisco.
He had a British accent.
A bit pretentious, maybe, but harmless.
And I remember the one time I met him, he had this nice suit on with a sort of formal overcoat, and he made a comment about his shoes being $1,300 shoes. And I remember thinking, who has $1,300 shoes? And who tells people they're $1,300 shoes? I just kind of thought it was weird.
Did you hang out with Danny and Kaushal, like, as a group?
No, it was me and Danny.
Kaushal seemed to be a day player that flitted in and out of Tyson and Danny's orbit. And when he did come around, he was anything but discreet. Kaushal was a man who liked to get noticed.
Kaushal would go to a bar and tell the bartender to buy everybody a drink. And then he'd pay for that and he'd tip the bartender a $100 bill. He loved throwing $100 bills around. So he had this reputation of being a baller, like a legit baller.
When I ask him if anything about Kaushal set off any warning bells, Tyson says no.
To me was more arrogance, but it was Danny's friend, so I wasn't gonna, be the Real Housewives of Orange County and get all bitchy or anything. That was my friend's friend. So when Danny finally told me that he and Kaushal, he was done with him, Kaushal had ripped him off. They were no longer friends, and we're on our way to a whole new start.
Tyson was thrilled to be losing the royal third wheel and have Danny all to himself again.
It was a great time.
In 2005, Tyson's company moved him to Munich to do consumer marketing for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Danny came to visit Tyson in Germany, and they had a blast.
You know, Oktoberfest in Munich is probably one of the greatest things that happens in this world. You know, in Munich, you're a 1 to 2 hour flight from anywhere in Europe. I was gone every weekend. It was awesome.
And even when 2007's Great Recession came calling and Tyson was let go, a big fat severance payout meant that even though his awesome live-work vacation was ending, there was more fun to be had.
All of a sudden, there was this massive amount of money, and I decided to move to Vegas, but my car was still in San Francisco, so I called Danny, and I told Danny about this fortune that was coming my way, and I'm flying to San Francisco to pick up the car. You want a road trip?
Danny gleefully accepted Tyson's invitation.
So we road tripped down to LA and to West Hollywood, partied our brains out. I think we were supposed to stay there for 2 days, and somehow we stayed there for 4.
From there, Tyson and Danny partied their way to Vegas, to what would be Tyson's new digs. Tyson had a big chunk of change sitting in the bank, and now, freed from the golden handcuffs of Intel, and still itching to travel, he booked a trip.
I decided to go to South America for a month.
But what Tyson didn't know, couldn't know at this point, was all that money, it didn't just make him wealthier. It also made him a target. A too tempting to resist opportunity for a certain type of criminal, provided, of course, that they got close enough to take advantage. Unfortunately for Tyson, they already had.
Flew to Buenos Aires.
Tyson let Danny stay at his place for a few extra hours since Danny's flight back to San Francisco was later in the day. Tyson headed down to South America, excited to live his best life.
When I got to Rio, I went to an internet cafe to pay my credit card bills. And I log into my bank account, and my balance was 0.
Tyson's bank account, which he had always balanced meticulously, was drained.
And then I'm looking at the transaction history.
When Tyson tells me this part of the story, my stomach seizes up for him. I mean, this is all of our worst fears, right? This tenuous tie to security. That trust we put into a tin machine to monitor our accounts.
And so I called the bank, and when I explained to the lady, like, I've been on a cruise in South America for the last 2 weeks, she says, "You're kidding." And there was a pause, and she got a supervisor, and they looked and they said, "Yeah, no, there's been withdrawals from 3 states." And then I checked my credit cards, and they were all charged up. The credit cards that were charged were the ones that I had left in my sock drawer, because you don't take all of your credit cards to Brazil. So now I'm thinking, oh my God, somebody's got into my house.
He knew he had been robbed. He worried about some stranger squatting in his home.
I called Danny from Brazil, and he didn't answer. I just left a voicemail that said, "Hey, something's wrong."
Tyson waited for a call back, but it never came.
It's kind of shock. It's I don't believe what I'm seeing. This isn't possible. The bank didn't understand it. They put a freeze on my account. It froze all my credit cards. And now I realize, oh my God, I'm in Rio and I have nothing. And so I went to the airport, and I went to United and I showed them my paperwork, the printouts of everything. And I said, I've been robbed. I don't have anything. I know my ticket is to go home next week, but I have to go now.
Tyson got on a plane back to the States with no idea what was waiting for him. To be safe and maybe maintain the element of surprise, he decided not to tell anyone he was coming home. Not until he landed, when he called his real estate agent.
I said, "Can you pick me up in 2 hours? I've got to get home." I said, "I think I've been robbed." He's like, "Yeah." He goes, I'll come get you. And I go, "Hey, bring a gun." I don't know what the hell's going on.
Returning home in a state of panic and shock, his entire bank account drained, he arrived gun in hand, fully adrenalized, ready to take on whatever awaited him.
We got to the house, and my garage door had windows in it, and I looked, and my car was parked at the same angle that I was parked it at, and front door was locked, so I was kind of confused. So used the key and opened the door slowly, said hello. No answer. I walked in, and first thing I saw to the left was the formal dining room, and there was a pile of cocaine. I was like, wow.
Now, a pile of cocaine might be something you lead with in a larger-than-life story, but in these parts, we call it an inconsequential footnote.
Then I go into my bedroom, and there's other people's clothes in my closet, jewelry, things that weren't mine. It was all kind of weird. And then I saw a suitcase, and that's Danny's suitcase. I open it up, and inside of it are all of the bank receipts from the ATM machines and all of the credit card receipts that he had used. And it was at that moment when my heart just broke.
And finally, Tyson gets it. All of it. Danny Garcia, his missing in action BFF partner in crime, wasn't his partner in crime at all. He was, in fact, just a criminal. And Tyson was his victim. More after the break. Up to this point, Tyson Wrensch hadn't really ever experienced any major disappointment or trauma in his life, a life he frequently and proudly refers to as a rose-colored glasses affair. But in the moment he realized his supposed best friend, Danny Garcia, had robbed him blind,
my rose-colored lenses had shattered. I kind of laid in the fetal position for a minute, not knowing what the hell was happening. All I remember is just hurting physically, like my chest tightened. And I guess, looking back, that's what betrayal feels like.
Tyson was processing things quickly now. Very quickly.
My first thought was just to sit in the living room with that gun and wait for Danny to get home. And then I decided I didn't want to go to jail. But I needed to do something, so I picked up the home phone and I called Danny's cell phone, knowing that the caller ID on his phone would be the house phone number. And he answered, and it was kind of like, hello? And I said, Danny? He goes, Tyson, are you home? I said, yeah. And you have some explaining to do. He's like, Tyson, I can explain it all. I'm very sorry because I'm at a business lunch right now. I will call you back. And that was the last conversation I ever had with Danny Garcia.
In that moment, as Tyson Wrensch wondered how he could have been so foolish, so blind, what he didn't know is that the worst of Danny's misdeeds and the toll they would take on his life were yet to come. Eventually, Tyson picked himself up off the floor. He knew he had to deal with what Danny had done to him. And there was some good news. The bank agreed to reimburse him the stolen money on a provisional basis while they investigated. When Tyson called the police to file a report and get his money back, they gave him a photo of Danny at the ATM making the withdrawal. Seeing that image of Danny doing the deed shook him free from his wounded stupor.
I decided to call our circle of friends and let them know that Danny was a bad guy. And no one answered. No one returned my calls.
Tyson's spidey sense was firing like crazy now. He knew something was definitely wrong. Why weren't his friends getting back to him?
Finally, I got a hold of somebody and I told him what had happened. And he said, Tyson, look, here's the deal. Danny tells me a different story. Danny told me that you were in South America for so long because you were one of San Francisco's biggest drug dealers. And, I worked at home. I was out and about all the time. And, here I was of our group of friends, the one who had a big house. It made perfect sense. That's when I realized, oh my God, this is how he does it.
The pieces of the pain puzzle were starting to fall into place for Tyson. And it was unnerving. Just when he felt he grasped the scope of the betrayal, the net cast wider. Tyson and Danny had been practically inseparable for 5 years. Was their whole time together a lie? When did Tyson go from being a friend to a mark? Was he ever a friend?
And then I remembered all the times where Danny had told me that this person ripped him off. Watch out for this person. And I realized he had alienated me from all of my friends in San Francisco. And they all believed I wasn't who I said I was.
Tyson had his money back, but his reputation and friendships had taken a real hit. He was feeling stranded, alone. The comforting confines of his life had been irreparably damaged. But as always with this story, there was more.
The day after I got home, I went out to my car, a brand new Infiniti G35, which was this sporty, sleek, black, two-door, amazing car. And it had a GPS system in it. And I had literally just bought the car. So I was playing around with the GPS system and discovered it had a history.
Tyson tells me as a casual BT dubs that he was a PI in a previous life, a private investigator. Something I frankly can't quite square. I mean, how did somebody who got paid to investigate duplicity get duped?
And I was able to backtrack from the last week of where it had been. I went to one house and knocked on the door, and it was there that I met a 17-year-old named Jacob. And sort of said, this is gonna be weird, but my name is Tyson, and I backtracked this vehicle. It was stolen to this house and this address. And I wondered if you had seen this car, and he said, yeah. He's like, I was in that car, and it was with a guy named Tyson, but it wasn't you.
Cue the dramatic zoom in on Tyson's face as his whole world is turned upside down as he realizes Danny has been impersonating him.
Jacob explains like, yeah, I met Danny online. He took me out to dinner. He said, can I see your driver's license? And so I showed him my driver's license, and he goes, wow, that's really weird because I saw this exact same first, middle, last name, but a different picture. And that's when it made sense. How Danny was able to get a new ATM card, change the PIN, change the daily withdrawal limit to go to restaurants and use my credit card.
Tyson had a fire in his belly. He was furious and hell-bent on exacting revenge. Not only had Danny stolen from him and tried to ruin his reputation with his friends, but he had impersonated him and had sex with a minor. He had to be stopped.
So then I called a Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department.
Tyson gets tossed into the all-too-familiar phone tree of bureaucracy.
I'm sorry. He's like, I'm buried.
And instead of being treated as a victim of crime...
So I went to another detective.
He's treated more like an irritating customer trying to return a faulty kitchen appliance past its refund window.
So now I'm on my third detective, and he finally says to me, he says, look, Tyson.
And then comes the painful criminal version of, he's just not that into you.
This is a white-collar case. Everything's insured. You haven't suffered any losses either. But we honestly only have time to deal with cases where someone is injured by another person until someone gets hurt.
Until someone gets hurt.
I am like, are you fucking kidding me right now? Are you kidding me? He basically took over my identity. He had people over to my house as me. He turned all of my friends against me. He basically sort of stranded me on an island of life, and there was no boat to get off, and I couldn't believe that even the police wouldn't help me. I finally got them to issue a $25,000 warrant, but it was non-extraditable, which means it would only be good in Vegas.
The warrant basically meant nothing, and Tyson knew it.
I was really, really frustrated.
He felt beaten down, out of place. Danny Garcia had vapored. The cops didn't care. I can't even imagine how it felt after everything he'd been through and be told, that's all we can do.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, where do you put that outside of years and years of therapy,
And I think also it's like, okay, he met and liked and trusted this person and traveled with this person and was good friends with this person for years and never saw any of this coming. I would think makes you start to doubt your spidey sense. You know, it's like, what about everybody else in my life? You're like, if you didn't see it in this person, who else are you not seeing it in?
When Kim and I sat down to interview Tyson, we thought we were going to hear about the murder of Cliff Lambert. Instead, we'd learned about Danny Garcia's betrayal and his estranged friendship with Kaushal Niroula, Cliff's cold-blooded killer. But what we still didn't know was how Tyson Wrensch went from embittered, conned friend to self-appointed detective, searching for the body of a man he didn't know in the middle of the vast California desert. The answer to that question would seem too far-fetched of a coincidence, even for a movie plot. And yet,
In the middle of March, I went to San Francisco.
Tyson spent the next several months trying to process what had happened to him and what was wrong with him that he'd been hoodwinked by Danny. And then, out of nowhere,
I got on a train that runs under Market Street, and when the train made the next stop and the doors opened, walking past me were Danny and Kaushal, arm in arm.
that sighting changed everything.
There was a moment where I thought of hopping off the train and just beating the shit out of him. I froze, and I remember the doors closing, thinking to myself, oh shit, what just happened?
Tyson thought about the lies Danny had told their mutual friends, how telling them that Tyson was shady had made them all the more trusting of Danny. He thought about all the negative things Danny had told him about Kaushal just months before he'd robbed Tyson blind. How relieved he had been to have Danny to himself after Danny and Kaushal's alleged falling out. That was when Tyson realized maybe this wasn't just about him and Danny. Perhaps this was something much bigger than that.
Danny and Kaushal were a team.
And this con operation was only getting started. Having his bank account hacked and his identity stolen would be child's play compared to the larger plans this criminal cabal had in store. An art heist from the Queen of England, bringing down a college, fleecing an innocent mother of two of her family fortune, robbing luxury condominiums, and not the contents, but the buildings themselves, and finally, of course, murder. Now, Tyson didn't know about any of that. Not yet. But he did know one thing.
I had been betrayed, and I had nothing but time and money. And somehow I was going to get revenge.
Tyson Wrensch, turns out, was a man not to be trifled with. He was going to take the criminals head on. But while he thought he knew who and what kind of people he was fighting, he'd soon find out he was very, very wrong. Next time on American Hustlers. To be good, you color inside the lines. To be bad, you need a new coloring book. Well, for all my yammering about being too scared to come into contact with actual criminals, after our interview with Tyson Wrensch, I suddenly found myself wanting to see the other coloring book. Enter
Dennis Dominates, Latin for master and dominator. I mean, the FBI and DEA have that as an alias for me, so we might as well just stick with it.
Dennis was Danny and Kaushal's driver. He had had a front seat throughout the years during all their various crimes, and he wanted to talk.
Yeah, he asked me a few times to, he wanted me to dispose of people.
About everything.
He was the farthest thing from that.
Yeah, we were going to shaft him, of course.
And then boom, that's when they got the million.
I'm thinking to myself, do we have to take you on a boat ride?
Can you tell us what you mean by that?
You can figure it out.
That's next time on American Hustlers.
American Hustlers is a production of Frequency Machine, produced in association with True Crime News. This episode was written and hosted by Julie Golden and me, Kim Kantner. Produced by me, Julie Golden, and Avi Glajanski. Editing and sound design by Amy Durant. Mixing and mastering by Julian Kwasniewski. Executive produced by Stacy Book, Dominique Ferrari, and Avi Glajanski. Featuring the voices of Vivek Bola as Kaushal Niroula, William Updike as Danny Garcia, and David Song as Miguel Bustamante. Music courtesy of Jingle Punks. Archival recordings of Kaushal Niroula and Danny Garcia provided by Sherry Loiter, Don Martinez, and Kim Hansen. Archival recordings of Craig McCarthy and the Palm Springs Police and Danny Garcia's recordings of Judge Downing and the court clerk via desertsun.com. The book, Until Someone Gets Hurt, by Sherry Loiter and Tyson Wrensch, with research assistance by Don Martinez and Kim Hansen, was an invaluable resource for us as we made American Hustlers. You can find a link to it in our show notes. Special thanks to Kathy Lombard, Matt Smith, Andy Wells, Tyson Wrensch, Sherry Loiter, Don Martinez, Kim Hansen, Bob Moeller, and Christine Anotu at Warner Brothers. If you like this episode and want to hear more stories like this, please leave us a review and tell everyone. It really helps other people discover the show. For more information on this and all of our series, check out frequencymachine.com.